press the red.
No, press the red. Okay,
Did
let
it
me
go?
adjust it first to begin to the end.
If the timer goes, it means it started already. You'll see the timer going.
Yes.
Okay, then it's starting. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما يقربنا منك برحمتك يا ارحم الراحمين. اللهم لا سهل الا ما جعلته سهلا وانت تجعل الحزن اذا شئت سهلا. اللهم اعذنا من شرور انفسنا ومن سيئات اعمالنا سهل وجعلنا لا اله الا انت استغفرك واتوب اليك. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد. This dua that I do in the beginning is from Sheikh Muhammad al-Yaqubi, and he got it from his teachers, So it's got all, I mean, it's, you can hear some of the sunnah du'as in there and stuff, but that's why I do it, because one of the sisters, when she was studying with him, she wrote them down, and she showed them to him, and he said, that's correct, and then, alhamdulillah, I got a copy of it, so then I just memorized it. So just for the blessing of doing that, so I just alhamdulillah. And then after that, I'll usually do the intention for the student of knowledge, and I can post that. Did I post that to the group? Have I posted that yet? For Imam al-Haddad's, he has an intention for the student.
Yes,
I have. Okay. So we did. We were here, right? We did this. We talked about the Siddiqun, right? We did this. Attaining the status of the person, like Sayyidina Abu Bakr was known as the Siddiq, right? We went over this, correct? Did you get this? Did we go over this? Oh yeah, sorry, you couldn't make it. So I'll start with this. Because he talks about this is line 6 of Prohibitions of the tongue. Yeah. So he says in here that if you watch your tongue and you continue to speak the truth, because there's a hadith that the one who continues to speak the truth, it's like they attain, they're called the Siddiq. Because Sadaqah and Siddiq is the emphatic form. The Fa'il is the emphatic form. So, and it's actually a spiritual station. And Sayyidina Abu Bakr was known as the Siddiq because he, right at the Isra al-Miraj, when some of the Kuffar Quraysh went to him because they thought, okay, now we'll get him. So they wanted to go to Sayyidina Abu Bakr because they were best friends, right? And they wanted to get the Prophet ﷺ. And Sayyidina Abu Bakr said, if he said it, ﷺ, meaning not necessarily that I believe you, right? Then I believe him. So I don't necessarily believe you, but I believe him. And in that there's a lot of lessons. One, that if, there's an ayah in the Quran, إِذَا جَاءَ فَاسِقٌ بِنَبَإٍ فَتَبَيَّنُوا. If a fasiq, and fasiq is used for a disobedient Muslim, and it's also used for a non-Muslim. إِذَا جَاءَ فَاسِقٌ بِنَبَإٍ. Naba is news. So any kind of information, فَتَبَيَّنُوا. To thabatu, as Shaykh Hamza mentioned, meaning to get it clarified. So everything we hear, we're not supposed to automatically believe. And there's a hadith, and he mentions it in the commentary, that if you believe everything you hear, that in that you're going to be believing some lies. So you have to get things verified. So if you hear something, and the Sayyidina Abu Bakr was like right away, if he said it, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then I believe him. And it's from that time he was known as a Siddiq. So it's a spiritual station. And there's an ayah in the Quran, it's in Surah An-Nisa, and this is here. It's also called the ayah of Muhabba, because it goes back to, the reason I mentioned it here is the Siddiqun are mentioned in this ayah. In the translation, it translates as the steadfast affirmers, because they speak the truth constantly. It's also the ayahs they say that have different, it's called asbab al-nuzul, different reasons for its revelation. Some people say that it came down because of Thawban. Thawban was the freed slave of the Prophet ﷺ. Some people say it came down because for another Sahabi. So what happened was that Thawban was a freed slave of the Prophet ﷺ, and one day the Prophet ﷺ saw him and he said, "You look really sick. Is something the matter with you?" And he said, "No, none of that, Ya Rasulullah," because he'd become very emaciated. So he looked sick. And he said, "None of that, Ya Rasulullah." He said, "But when I miss you, I come and I see you. And then I stop missing you, right? When I'm with my family and I haven't seen you for a while, I just come and look at you, and that's how I get my fill, basically." And so, but he said that, but I've been thinking about, because the Sahaba were just, the Prophet ﷺ was training them to just think about the akhirah. So he was thinking about the akhirah, and he said, but I've been thinking about the akhirah, and I'm worried that I may not make it to Jannah. And that is their humility, that a lot of times we don't even think, "Oh, am I going to make it or not?" He said, "I don't know if I'll make it to Jannah, and two, if I make it to Jannah, I don't know if I'll be at your level." And he had made himself sick, like he'd stopped eating. That was love, because fear can't do that. That's love. And so they say that it was for Thawban. Some people say it was from another Sahabi it was revealed. And Sheikh Salman was saying it could have been revealed for multiple reasons, because many of the Sahaba, this was their intense love. And so these ayahs came down that whoever obeys Allah and the Messenger, those will be with the ones upon whom Allah has bestowed favor of the prophets, the steadfast, the siddiqun, of the truth, the martyrs, the shuhada, and the righteous. وَحَسُنَ أُولَٰئِكَ رَفِيقًا. And what an excellent are those companions. Meaning that if you obey Allah and His Messenger, we're not from the prophets, right? But we could be from them, right? And so this bushra, this good news, was given to Thawban and whoever else from the Sahaba. They were worried that they wouldn't be with the Prophet. Some of these ayahs came down. That's one of they're called this is called the ayah of muhabba, because love is a lot stronger than to push somebody to do stuff than fear is, right? And it shows, because otherwise you won't stop eating, right? Except out of love, subhanAllah. So it has the word siddiqun in there. And it's one of the ways to attain this is to be with them, is to be constantly speaking the truth. And I mentioned today in class, because if you notice now, it's, for Muslims to lie, like kids get trained to lie, unfortunately, by their parents, because if you, like I grew up in a society in Karachi where, sometimes, in that society, sometimes if you say the truth, like you're correct, you're harmed, people will, And so children learn hypocrisy in certain communities, because those communities, schools, all of that, they're not necessarily built on true Islamic values. And so people have to retrain themselves. And so we're in an age where truth is not prevalent in the Muslim community. And so I was telling the girls that if you revive a sunnah, not sunnah as in not fard, but any sunnah in the general meaning, because sunnah has a meaning, it's the way of the Prophet ﷺ, that's that general meaning. When the ummah has become fasid, man ahya sunnati عند فساد الأمة فله أجر 7 shahidan or 100 shahidan, or kama qala sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The one who revives a sunnah of mine when the ummah has become corrupt, they get the reward of 70 or 100 shuhada, or as the Prophet said it. So I was telling the girls that they shake hands and they do these things. I said, don't belittle any of it, because anything that we're doing, if it's, and the general Muslim community is not doing it, inshallah you get the reward of reviving it, like a martyr. People want to be a martyr, and they're mentioned in here, after the siddiqun, the martyrs are mentioned, right? So it's like a spiritual station, martyrdom. And there's many, many different ways to die as a martyr. The battlefield is just one of them. Many, many ways to die as a martyr. Um, okay, and then he said, and then I said, so this is the dark blue is my translation of the lines of the poem because it's 144 lines to the poem. And then, as I said, Allah is the Qadim and the Baqi, meaning because Allah always has been. That means Qadim, meaning he didn't have a beginning, and Baqi means he always will be. So the Qadim has the meaning of negating a beginning to Allah, and Baqi has the meaning of negating an end to Allah. So he says, okay, look, these are this is what you have to do, but Allah is the always has been, always will be, and His control are all affairs, and He alone is the protector. So you have to remember that Allah, like we do what we have to, and then you just, leave it up to Allah. Like in the aphorisms of Ibn Atta'illah, he's a very famous Maliki scholar from the past, and they teach his aphorisms, their wisdoms, like short sayings. They have aqidah, they're full of all this wisdom. He says in there that if you realize your own ubudiyah to Allah, the more you will realize it, the more help you will get. Remember I was mentioning that to you? The more you will realize that Allah is in control, and you give up internal control. So you take the outward means, but you give up that internal control of the worrying and the what will happen, the tadabbur, the reflection, and just realize that we're just slaves of Allah internally. He said, to that extent you'll get help from Allah, the more you realize that internally. So he says, we're not in charge. We just have to do what He tells us to do, and He alone is the protector. Yet He has linked effects to their causes, and it is He who has ordained and prohibited. Meaning, there's the sabab, and there's the cause and the effect. Meaning, if we do something haram, there's generally there's an effect of that. So he said, but Allah has made this a world of cause and effect, and so we have to interact with that. But in the end, meaning internally, you have to know, right? So we have to get rid of the worry. Like they say, Imam Malik, whenever he would have to give a fatwa, Imam Malik, he saw the Prophet every night in the dream, every night. They would say when he would have to give a fatwa, he would stop eating and drinking, and he would just focus so hard to give the fatwa. One, because it's a huge responsibility, and he would get it approved by all the people he needed it approved by. And he would do a lot of la hawla wa la quwwata, la hawla wa la quwwata, because that gets rid of anxiety. Like the la hawla wa la quwwata will get rid of that internal anxiety, because there's no strength and power except by Allah. So getting rid of that internal feeling okay, what if this, what if that, what if this, because that has no benefit. Because we just take we take the means, and just whatever the effects are, we leave them up to Allah. And that's He's reminding you. You take the means, there are certain things Allah has made prohibited, we have to do that, and then just leave it up to Allah, right? And there's a hadith that and I was just shocked by, I think probably the first time I heard it, there's a hadith that no one will enter Jannah by his or her actions. And the Sahaba were surprised, and they say in the hadith, not even you, Ya Rasulullah, they couldn't believe it. You're perfect, you're, all they saw of him, that, even before they say, in Aqidah we say, according to the dominant opinion, the prophets, all prophets, even before prophecy, they can't do any sin. Even though you don't consider it sin before prophecy, because they don't, after 40 is when the Prophet got the message. So that there was no Islam before that. And the people who came in between prophets, they're not generally accountable if they didn't get the correct message. So, and they said, not even you, Ya Rasulullah. And he said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, no, not even me, except Allah. And yataghammadani Allahu bi rahmati, except Allah will shower me with His bounty, with His mercy. Because the ulama say your life on this earth is limited, but you're asking for unlimited time in Jannah. It's our time here on earth is finite, but we're asking for infinity of Jannah. So you can't compare. Like there, and so even though the Prophet ﷺ was perfect, and Allah Ta'ala swears by his life. And one of the Sahaba said Allah Ta'ala only swears by only the Prophet ﷺ's life. Only. La'amruka. Like that's like, Allah only swears by great things. But even the Prophet ﷺ said that I won't enter Jannah by my actions. As perfect as they were. So he says just remember that, And there's no inherent connection between reward and punishment in the actions of the slave. So Allah, we just say, okay, haram we do, and that's why I told the girls, there is a punishment related with the haram that you do, but Allah can forgive what He wants. And that's why it's good. If you do a haram, just make tawbah, and it's not an excuse to do haram. Or the other thing, you could do a fard. And I would say stuff sometimes like, maybe you got mad at your parents, but you did the fard prayer and then Allah didn't accept the fard. Because you were rude to your parents or whatever, something else.
Oh, it negated.
Yeah, like it negated it. Like, that's why we say there, with fard, there's a reward associated with it. But did we get the reward or not? And with the haram, there is a punishment associated with it. But you make tawbah and you're sincere, and Allah could, very well, maybe that doesn't even get written against you. So that's why we always have to keep that in mind. I just remind them that it's associated. Especially if somebody's feeling despair, you just say, well, Allah forgives all sins except shirk, So he just reminds you that, we're slaves, and just remember that. And then he says,
Can I just mention something?
or maybe can we
Or
hold
maybe
off
later,
to the,
yeah.
I've been trying to hold up
Yeah.
the comments till the end so that we, do take this knowledge of the prohibitions of tongue. Few are those who know it. So he says, and I'll read line 10 also, its occurrence is more frequent in these lands. This is a West African scholar. Shinklit was the old name for Mauritania. Then of the matters related to mortgages and of zakat collector. So he says, and this is really important, he says, okay, why did I write this poem of 144 lines, and why did I leave all those more complicated matters? Because he was a very high-level scholar. He said there's these issues of mortgages and zakat collector and all the fiqh related to it. He said the reason I did this is because there's more issues with people's tongues than there are issues right now in his time related to the mortgage collector and the zakat collector and the fiqh related to it. And so he says that you have to put, in terms of your knowledge and what you have to learn, you have to give certain things priority, and it has to do with the occurrence of that thing. So if we're having more issues with diseases of the tongue, and that's what he said, there's more issues with people doing haram with their tongue and with their ears and with their, because he mentions other things also, not diseases related to tongue. And he says, so I have to give precedence to that than to these other sort of more rarer things, right? I mean, they studied a lot of things, but so he says, and this is this is so important now, because a lot of times people will study all this tafsir and they'll study all this Arabic, but they don't know their fard ayn, right? And so Imam Munawi says that some scholars have said, from what does not concern another, because the Prophet ﷺ said, from excellence in your faith is leaving what does not concern you, right? So sometimes being concerned with knowledge that is not a priority, that's also shaitan's way, right? Because he wants you, if he can't get you to leave knowledge completely, what is he going to do? He's going to busy you with knowledge that is not a priority. So he says, from what does not concern another is a servant learning that which is not a priority for him and her, and leaving that which is a priority. Because what is far is whatever you need in your daily life. Like, what am I doing? I'm working. What are the rules for me? I'm working in this job. I have children. What are the rules for me raising children? Like, what do I have to do? What do I have to do as a teacher? What's fun? Like, I text Sheikh so much, sometimes things will come up. What is the ruling of this? What is the ruling of that? Like, 16 years he's been teaching, or 17 now. And now with WhatsApp, mashallah, I have to hold myself back even with, just this morning I asked him a question. There's so many things that, because alhamdulillah, and Sheikh Hamza, when he started classes with us, they were very particular, your fard ayn, you have to learn your fiqh. They would say Arabic is fard kifaya, it's a community obligation, so some people have to know Arabic. Tafsir is a much later science that is taught by the scholars that have mastered all the other sciences. You don't have to learn tafsir, right? But they would tell us, you have to learn what corrupts the heart, because you have to go to Allah with a sound heart. You have to learn what you're doing haram with your 7 limbs. So they just really prioritize it, and that's why they gave us the basic things, the basic text, and then they were like, if you don't want to learn tafsir, you don't want to learn Arabic, there are Sahaba who didn't learn Arabic, you don't have to do it. You don't have to memorize Quran, you don't have to, just learn the basics. And then whatever comes in your life, if you get married, then learn the fiqh of marriage. Do I have to do this? Or am I doing it just as an extra out of ihsan, excellence to my husband? Because sometimes the ego doesn't want to do certain things. Right? What do I have to do? This I'm doing it because that's my sadaqah to my husband for the day, for example, or my wife. You know what I mean? So it's important to know what you have to do. Okay, this is such an important line, and it's cut me so many times from actually saying stuff with my tongue so many times. Lines 11, 12, 13. Adorning that which the shari or the law maker has deemed disgraceful is from the prohibited matters of the tongue. Likewise, that which the shari has deemed blameworthy is from the prohibited matters as well, and I explain it in a minute. Okay. So, for example, adorning it with our speech, meaning, for example, Allah, who's the shadir, Allah is the shadir, literally, right? And the prophets on earth figuratively, correct? But ultimately, Allah is the shadir, right? So, if He's made certain things prohibited, it means they are. Allah Ta'ala hates the haram, right? They're His not emotional hate, but they're disgraceful. He does not like the haram, correct?
Yes.
And so, if we're praising something that's haram with our tongue, we're flipping the sharia, right? Mm-hmm. And so we're actually, it's actually prohibited to do that. Because we're saying that which is haram indirectly it's actually permitted, and it's actually praiseworthy, and we're also encouraging the person to actually do more of it. So that also is problematic. So he says, adorning, meaning making, it look good, beautifying it with our speech, that which the shari has deemed disgraceful, so anything that's haram, right? And then with the Hanafis, they have a lower level of haram, which is makruh tahriman. And then the other ones are lower, but these two they would say are sinful. So, for example, somebody's wearing, I gave this example, somebody's wearing something that's prohibited, and they come and they ask you, right? And so, if you can't tell them the truth, right, you have to the least of it is to keep silent. The least of it. So you cannot show them any pleasure in that thing that they're wearing that's prohibited. That's the least of it. And it comes up a lot, I feel, with women. And especially, I think, in the Desi community, because, there's so much dress, and there's so much focus on dress and weddings. And, people will go to weddings, and they'll say, well, how do I look? And they're going out, and they're wearing makeup, and they're wearing tight clothing, and it's too bright, and the jewelry, and they'll say, how do I look? And so,
So what do you say? You just silent?
The least of it is to be silent.
Come on, tell me. What do you say?
Yeah.
You have to.
So and I want to mention there's 3 conditions to commanding to good and forbidding evil. And remember, it's one of the way Allah Ta'ala describes this ummah and He praises us And right after it's mentioned that, يَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنكَرِ. So what's one of the things that makes us great? It's not unconditionally that we're great. Of course we're great in that we're blessed to be from the Prophet ﷺ. But our greatness, one of the reasons for our greatness is that we command to good and forbid evil, right? And what are the conditions to commanding? Because this would come under that, commanding to good and forbidding evil. So in this situation, meaning if these conditions are met, it means you have to say something, right? Okay, one is that you know the rule. So if somebody's doing something and you know it's prohibited, right? Then you fulfill the first condition, right? Okay, then is there a benefit in saying anything? Meaning, would they at some point leave it? I mean, they might get mad at you now, but maybe
They get
they'll.
mad.
They might. That's not a.
They say, you're judging me.
So, if
Why are you judging me?
if there's
And often this is Muslims.
yeah, maybe we can wait on that.
Okay.
But, yeah. So, if there's benefit in it, whether it's later or now, blaming is not considered. Like somebody getting angry, but if you feel they would still listen, then there's still benefit, right? And it won't lead to greater harm. 2 and 3 are different. I'll explain in a minute. Okay, so for example, they give this example of if you say, like in Morocco, like Sheikh Hamza was telling us, if somebody gets angry, they would say, Salli ala Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. They'll say, pray on the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Because if you pray on the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, the one who prays on me one time, right? Allah Ta'ala prays, meaning sends down 10 mercies, right? And so, and it will remove so it's a mercy to have good character, so they will, and it calms a person down, like it's a cooling dhikr. So if somebody who's angry, and then they pray on the Prophet ﷺ, it will help with that. So now, if somebody didn't grow up with that, and then they're angry and you say, Salli ala Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and they're just gonna get even angrier, right? So, it's leading to actually even greater harm, right? So there's 2 and 3 are different, right? Sometimes it may not lead to greater harm, right? But there's no benefit, right? If these 3 conditions are met, then it becomes wajib to actually correct them. Then mandatory. So, and then maybe last few minutes we can leave for like questions and comments and things. I just want to get a little bit more done usually. Is that clear? Is that clear?
Did you say that the person's anger and then getting angry and escalating is like harm?
Because they might actually say something against the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for example, and get themselves out of Islam. You know what I mean? And so you would actually, in that case, it's worse.
Increase their crisis of faith?
Well, I mean, that takes them out of Islam if they say something derogatory about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
But
If you say,
it's not about Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because they might not, like if they are used to saying sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then they might say something, it might take them out. But in general case, people are not used to. In
correct.
that case,
they might say something derogatory, like if you say pray on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then they're so angry and they're not used to that, they might actually say something about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam just because you mentioned his name sallallahu
And it
alaihi
would
wasallam.
become your sin too? That they could
Yes. If you know that about that person, and you're generally not supposed to, unless you know that okay, they won't say anything, and I'm pretty sure about it. They grew up with that when somebody gets angry, like in Morocco, you'll say prayer and they'll calm down. Otherwise, you have to not say anything. So you get yourself into trouble, and they probably have left the deen.
This can be the same with other expressions, like when we say that
Yeah.
without the person saying it, it doesn't worship and everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And then, and then inshallah, okay, we'll leave like maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes for questions and comments. Okay, continuing with this line. So assisting in a sin is a sin. Okay, how does that go back to adorning something that the Shari Allah Ta'ala has made prohibited? So for example, if they say, if somebody praises somebody who's oppressive, like they're oppressive to their spouse, or they're oppressive to whoever, they're oppressive, they're like a leader in the community and they beat their wife or whatever, and you're praising them, right? Then that is encouraging them to do more. Or if you say to somebody, oh, that dress looks really good on you. Why is it that people will wear something nice? A lot of times it's for other people, right? Otherwise they would dress well at home, but sometimes it's just to show off. And then that's an encouragement, right? Doing something. We're made that way that if somebody says something positive to us that we think is encouraging, we'll do that act generally even more, right? And so he says in here, he quotes a hadith that assisting somebody in sin is actually a sin. And that's also problematic, is because you're changing the Sharia, and two, you're assisting somebody in sin. For example, and he gives some examples here in the commentary. For example, taxes. Now, Islamically, income tax in Islam, right? It gets taken out of us here, like forcefully, right? So, right, a lot of times people don't have a choice. To actually praise it and say it's actually, it's a good thing, which I've heard people do, that is sinful. Because income tax, according to Islam, is prohibited. So if it gets taken from somebody, and they don't have a choice, that's a different thing. But they should still dislike it because there's nothing that Allah made prohibited except, one, we have to like it, and two, we know there's benefit in it, because the benefit doesn't go back to Allah Ta'ala. These rules are only for our benefit. And so sometimes you might have to do something that we know is wrong, but don't then make it worse by then saying something about it just to make ourselves better. Do you see? That's also adorning something that is blameworthy, and that's flipping the Sharia. Do you see what he's saying? And then I have some lines from they wish you were pliant, so they were pliant. Mudahana waddu law tudhinu fayudhinu. Mudahana has, how in English we'll say buttering up? Dahan literally in Arabic is what? Oil. Is oil, right? So mudahana, there's two words. There's mudahana, which is the buttering up. They wish you were pliant, so they were pliant. And that root of that word is used in this ayah. That's blameworthy, and that's giving up some of your religion for some dunya. We matter. Allah Ta'ala says they wish you were pliant, so they were pliant, right? You worship our gods one day, we'll worship your God one day, right? You say I'm a piece of your religion in whatever way, but it's for the benefit of the dunya. If sometimes you can't command to good and forbid evil because there's no benefit in it, that's different. You're not doing it for the dunya. You have to make sure it's not for any personal gain of the dunya. It's very tricky. It's very, as a teacher, I have to, like, Sarah, are you doing it? I have to constantly, like, renew
Check
my
the
intention and just make sure and check this way and check that way. And it's, huh? Of course, it's a weakness. Yeah. Okay, mudara is praiseworthy. Mudara is actually giving up some of the dunya. It's the other way around. For the akhirah. Mudara is praiseworthy, is giving up some of the dunya for the akhirah, right? Sometimes you have to do it, but sometimes it's something that you don't have to, but it would be recommended. Like, okay, whatever, just to keep, family ties or ties with that friend, I'm just going to let that go, or I'm just going to give up what they owe me, whatever, something, or I won't seek my right, or I won't say anything, or I'll make up because if I don't make up, there's just going to be rancor, there's going to be problems in the family, whatever, That's mudara, that's actually praiseworthy. So you're giving up something from the dunya, but it's for the akhirah, it's praiseworthy. But mudahana it's prohibited, right? So for example, I was somewhere, I was teaching somewhere, and somebody told me that I was having a really hard time with the grade, and I couldn't understand in this particular grade, this subject that I'm teaching, how did people get to this level? How did these students get to this level? And sometimes I'm just so naive, and they were just not at that level. Like, how could they even make it? They were failing so badly in what I was teaching them, that I didn't realize that maybe they didn't even pass the last level. So they said, oh, it's too hard, this and that, and can you make it easier? And I said, okay, we'll give up. Let's just drop some of what I'm doing, whatever. I spoke to one of my shuyukh, and he's like, sorry, don't, just make it easy and whatever. I said, okay. So I went to the management. They're like, no, this book was made part of our curriculum, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, whatever. I was like, okay, I guess we have to do it. Then somebody told me, and they laughed about it. They said, well, some of the students actually were passed from the last grade. Meaning...
Oh, they didn't earn
and they laughed about it.
Ability to go on.
Yeah, they changed some of the grades.
Oh, the teachers?
And, and I was like, and it didn't even hit me. Like, I'm just so naive sometimes, And it was like towards the end of that semester, and I was like, it was like one of the worst, like, periods of, and they said, anything that happens in here, you can't say to anybody because I could lose my job. And they suggested, because I was like, these students are just like complaining and whining, and they're like, just change some of the grades, they're just like add some numbers, and I was like, oh. And they laughed about it. And so there's so many harams in that one, because they're making something haram. That's lying in a grade, right? That's haram. Like, it's a major sin to lie. And then they laugh about a haram. Like, that's another issue. And then they're telling me to do that. That's another issue. I went to one of my teachers, and I was like, is there some kind of fatwa? Like, because this person was very practical. Like, I was so confused. Is there some kind of fatwa? Like, what is going, like in the end of time, they say even like somebody who's practicing will get confused. I was just like, and my teacher, one of my shuyukh, he just laughed. Like, in Arabic, they say, sharrul bala yudhikul insan, the worst of tribulations make somebody laugh. And he just laughed, and he said, oh, that happens so much in Muslim countries. And I was like, okay, am I missing some fiqh ruling here? And I was like, okay, what's the ruling? And he said, haram. And I was like, okay, that's why I've been getting anxiety all semester, And so it was just, like, I was stuck. Like, what do I do? And there was like, And I eventually wrote a letter. I mean, they made sure that I wasn't back in that teaching position anymore. And I didn't say what they had done, you know. But I think at some point later, I actually wrote a letter, and I explained some things in that. But that's mudahana. That's like clear mudahana. And they said, oh, these students are very righteous, and they've come, they're really trying hard, and all that. You know, and then like finding ways to justify something that's completely, and this is like, this person like fasts, the Nafat fasts, and all that. And they're like, oh, I have a family. They grew up like in a very practicing Muslim country, and they're like, I have a family. So one day I said to them, I said, ittaqillah. I said, have fear of Allah. And after that, I noticed like, something was really wrong with them, like they would keep a distance. And one day I actually addressed them and I said, what's wrong? And they said, you know, that day you said ittaqillah, and that was, and I was just so you don't know who can just because, and they have a high degree, but one thing, and I just feel so blessed that Allah has given me like scholars who studied with scholars all the way back, like unbroken chain to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That they would constantly, and they taught us the fardain, you know, like, this is mudahana. So, like, when it happens, you know what it is. Because people can really butter it up. Oh, I have a family, I have this, but, like, you know, so I knew what it was. And I had people to go talk to, you know, because the teacher who told me, Sarah, give them something easier, you know. And I said, okay. They said, don't put them to the level that you know, like, and I said, okay, whatever, you know, I'll make it easier. So then I try to get, you know, okay, let's drop one book. And then finally when I was like, this is why they're failing, because they didn't pass and then you feel like an idiot, you know, but there's so much, and people will make it so beautiful that, you know, this is all mudahana. Just, you know, and people who like studied, like somebody else that they told me who did this, that passed these students are somebody I know well who's like studied and memorized Quran, but they haven't been like, alhamdulillah, Allah blessed me to where I was like very like, I have to learn my fiqh. What is the ruling of this? Tell me the ruling of that. Tell me the ruling of this. Like I was constantly going back to, you know, because one thing like, we were taught is that in the early community, the Sahaba very strong in their fiqh. They knew, what do I have to do? What do I don't have to do? But most of them hadn't memorized the Quran. Like Shaykh Salman was saying, by the time the Prophet ﷺ had passed away, only 22 out of the 125,000. They say there were as many Sahaba as there were prophets. But very few had memorized. But they were learning their, like, what we call fardain. They may not have known tafsir, they may not have, but they knew what they absolutely had to do and how to get out of, you know, how to, you know. So part of it is ignorance, right? And some of it is just having a lot of fear of poverty. Anyway, so calling forbearance, abasement, and scrupulousness, satanic whisperings. Okay, that's also flipping. This is the same line. So forbearance is hilm, right? Say the Halima was the Prophet ﷺ's wet nurse. Halim is somebody who is slow to anger, right? So somebody who's slow to anger and who's patient, right? They'll be called somebody who's, they're like weak, and they're someone who people like. Let them take advantage of you. People will say that. You've done too much good for this person, but did you do it for this person, or did we do it for Allah? Right? So you get people just trample on you, and they take advantage of you. Don't let them do that. But if we're doing it for Allah, really doing it for Allah, then we shouldn't want any. I mean, it hurts, right? We're human beings, right? It hurts sometimes. But if we're doing it for Allah, and we don't want anything in return, then it doesn't matter if they don't, right? And scrupulousness is called wara in Arabic, right? It's like a higher level of taqwa, right? Where you leave even the doubtful matters, right? So they're like, oh, that's waswasa. But when you actually think, okay, there's actually a valid reason why I need to not eat this food. It's not just whisperings where, you don't have a reason not to eat the food, right? Like I went to the farmer's market and I bought stuff that I know is non-GMO, and now Shaitan comes and like, oh, why did you buy that? There's no, it's baseless whispering, right? That's all Shaitan, because there's no concrete, I can't base my doubt on anything concrete. So, but if I'm trying to practice, like I want to leave things that are doubtful, and people are like, oh, that's just waswasa, oh, you're too hard on yourself, or oh, why do you, like one of my, somebody whose kids I taught for a long time, she's very careful about, she would only teach her kids so much, and she's like, as long as they get their fardain, as long as they do their math, English, some basic reading, she didn't want to like put too much on them. And she was like, people were giving her a hard time, why don't you make your girls do more, why don't you, and it's like, but they're doing their fardain, they're careful about whom they speak about, she was learning she knew her fiqh of menstruation, she knew her fiqh of, and she was teaching her girls. So you can't blame that person, right? But it's like in the end of time, and subhanAllah, it's happened to me where people will completely ignore people who are like leaving even fasting, like a basic fard, in Muslim families, but they'll start getting nitpicky about, like some people have OCD, obsessive compulsive, or they'll say, sometimes parents will do this to their children, like they'll fuss about little things, but they'll leave other things that are huge, like their child might be backbiting, or they may have really bad adab with the elders, or they may, and they might leave that, but then they might have certain things in the house that they feel that are important to them, but that's flipping the Sharia, right? It's important to prioritize. Like I know with some relatives, I will leave certain things. Like if that was my child, I'm like, they would have this list of things to do. But this person is not even fulfilling the basic fard. So if I ask them to do these extra things that are good for their training, but it will be too much for them, and they'll leave more stuff from the dunya, from the deen.
It's more important to do than reading Quran, for example, if you're not yet
Right.
prayer.
Right. Or making a mess of your room is not a big deal if you're backbiting, or if you're rude to the parents, or if you're rude. You know what I mean? Like, so people have to like prioritize. And so it's and I think it's just alhamdulillah, just always having been in a fiqh class like regularly. I'm either teaching it or reviewing it, or like Sheikh Sadiq came back and he's like given help. He's been sick, like really tired, and we've been with Sadamuna, and I'm like, Sheikh Sadiq, and I was like, I don't want to be rude to him. So Sadamuna was like, okay, I'll play Salat al-Hajjah, and we're waiting for our classes, because it just helps us just to, along with continuing the book has been teaching that, but it just helps me to be in that environment, to just where I'm with somebody who's so strict in their practice, and that we're asking questions and we're learning, and even if it's like our one class a week that we can get, And I was telling him one day, I said, we don't have scholars here, please, just give us priority. And he always gives us priority, mashallah. And I have to watch my adab sometimes. Sometimes I'm like, Sheikh Sadiq, I'm really desperate here. I'm like, it's hard in America, and I just need this to maintain, my own himma. And so you just kind of have to be in that environment where you're just constantly learning something that's, that where you're learning your basic fard aim in your life. And the people that you're interacting with. Like, what's the priority in my life with the people that I interact with? So I let stuff go in the house because I'm a teacher and people look at me and like, oh, is that too strict? This too strict? You know what I mean? So I'll let other things go. I'm like, oh, they may not take certain things in the deen that I might tell them if I tell them this. For example, like take out the trash or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, okay, well, why take out the trash? But then I can tell them there's something else from the bean, then I should take out the trash. You know what I mean? Like sometimes it's that subtle that somebody can kept put off. Do you see by the bean? Do you see what I'm saying? So if your children are like that, you have to really balance. You know, I mean, with your own children, you can like do a lot more, but you also have to be careful. Like I have to set my priorities. Yeah, and like with the fun, okay, do the fun, right? And also the environment that they're in. What environment are they in? Such that I can't even, you know what I mean? Yeah. So we'll stop on line 14 because Allah subhanakallah wa bihamdihi subhanakallah. جزا الله عنا سيدنا صلى الله عليه وسلم وأهله جزا الله عنا سيدنا صلى الله عليه وسلم وأهله جزا الله عنا سيدنا. Okay, now any questions or anybody who wants to leave, please leave. But anybody who has questions or. Yeah.